So it's almost like an insurance policy for a utility to spend that money, whether, I don't know exactly how they're going to implement this, but the reliability of the railroads based on the condition of the track. And if they have to go out there and undercut 2 or 3 times more than they do a regular rail, it's going to slow down the traffic. Just like now in the summer, they're doing the track work up there. Cycle times have increased, and because of the slow work. In the fall, traditionally the cycle times will start to decrease as performance continues to improve as the track work moves out. But if you're doing this annually, every summer you're cutting, you're going to have a problem with slower cycle times, and the utilities won't get their coal.
Okay.
Appreciate your answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
No.
I have one more a question on ethanol for a moment, and there's a lot of literature out there which suggests that ethanol, especially corn-based ethanol, may not be the solution. All these plants are being developed, etc., but it may not be competitive with ethanol produced by other means, switchgrasses or sugarcane from Brazil, etc. And that, moreover, pulling corn out of the food and feed chains and raising the price of everything from cornflakes to the price of a decent steak, maybe a very, very high price. It may not be something that's sustainable. And much of the literature I read also suggests that other kinds of more woody plants, more cellulose, etc., again, may be much better ways to go than going with corn-based ethanol. Do you think that corn, and there's quite a bit of literature that also suggests that the calculations surrounding corn-based ethanol show that not all the costs are taken into account when they do the analysis. And when you do a full cost analysis of ethanol, it shows to be that it costs more to produce a gallon of ethanol than it saves in gasoline. Would you want to comment on those criticisms?
That's spoken from a true oil producer. You know, the oil.
Well, these come from people who are not oil producers, but who are looking at other kinds of alternative energy sources, such as wood-based fibers, other more cellulose. Go ahead.
If anybody had a chance to see that 2020, the last 3 minutes of that one night that they had on ethanol, that was done by a study group that's 80% funded by Exxon. The oil.
Which one is that? Is that Cornell?
No, it's a four-letter acronym. But those guys were they're putting out this anti-ethanol because the biggest opposer to ethanol is the oil companies, because they're eventually, as these states mandate E85, just like Brazil does to get their oil independence from foreign oil, it's going to affect the oil companies. The oil companies aren't participating in the building or the production of ethanol. So it's a competitor to the oil companies. Now, when you go to a gas station that is a non-oil company gas station, ethanol will be on the pumps right there at the island. If you go to a gas station that's run by a major oil company, they make them put the ethanol pump off to the side, out of the way, because they say the customers might get confused with, well, it's a big yellow handle, big yellow sign, and it's like putting diesel. They've got diesel up there. It's no different than diesel and gasoline. But going back to your original question on cellulosic ethanol, we're looking at the corn base in the United States can probably handle up to about 15 billion gallons. Anything over that is going to have to go into cellulosic. There's enough cropland out there. You know, if you look at the increase in corn acres, you know, we're looking at a bumper crop in corn. And 3 years ago, the farmer received $22 billion for their corn crop. This year, they're going to receive $40 billion. And the price of corn back then was around $2. Right now, it's about $3.34. It had been up to $4.40, and it fluctuates like any other commodity. But the impact on cornflakes and stuff are cents. I mean, with less than 10 cents a box when you look at the overall, because of the fluctuation in the amount of corn that's used in there. The big impact is the efficient utilization of the corn kernel. And our company, say 90% of the or 100% of the ethanol plants out there today are taking the corn kernel and they put it in hammer mills and they grind it up and they put it in their fermenters. If you're looking at Brazilian, they already have sugar. They don't have to convert to starch or sugar. So they have a 20% advantage on the cost. What our company is doing, you talk about technologies going forward, our plants, and we're actually marketing this to the existing plants. We have a fractionation technology where we take the corn kernel, we take the brand off the kernel, it's the hull, the skin, take that off the kernel. We take the germ, which is the brown part on the bottom, we take that off, and we send the pure endosperm into the fermentation. So what you get is you get 17 to 20% less fiber because those enzymes have to work on the fiber, and you increase that 17% with more endosperm, so you get almost a 20% additional throughput of ethanol. So if you have our plants are typically 108 million gallon nameplate. We'll be pushing 125.7 million gallons through those plants just by removing that those two elements, the germ and the corn, or the brand. Then we take the brand and we have a biomass boiler and we burn the brand in the boiler. It has almost 8,000 BTUs. We take the germ, we run it through a screw press, and we get corn oil, which is selling at $600 a ton right now. We take the germ cake that's left over and we burn it. So we have almost 90% of our energy requirements off the corn. So as they say, we're getting everything out of the corn kernel except for the squeal. And what also you can take and with the feed from the DDG, the distiller's grain that's left over, and you maybe heard somebody talk about the cattle market. We're not going to the cattle market. That has a 28% protein. By taking out the germ, which is the fat in the DDG, it increases the protein level to 50%, which at that time makes it for the hog and the swine and poultry markets, which are being serviced now by soybeans. Well, at the price of soybeans, now you can come in there and compete with the soybean meal that's feeding those two entities. So we're actually developing a new market for our DDG, and we're not going to be over there flooding the cattle market as the other traditional ethanol plants. So also when we take in our fractionation technology, we'll go to other plants and we can just hook it right into theirs, and they can see the same benefits with minimal modifications within the ethanol process, and they'll get, depending on this, they'll get up to 20% increase in throughput of ethanol off the same. Well, they'll have more corn, but and less cost. The energy costs are 20% less because you're not drying as much DDG. You'll have 15% less water that you're using, and ethanol plants are traditionally, you're looking at about 3 gallons, 3.8 gallons per gallon of ethanol that's produced. But the energy, as far as that goes, if you did the side-by-side example of what it takes to make a gallon of gas, you'll see that ethanol is far superior, far less cost than it would be to cost than the cost of a gallon of gas.
Thank you. Mr. Blassingame, one question here. I enjoyed very much the fact that you included many of the letters that you had sent to the FRA, Amtrak, and others about your idea, and the reaction that you got. Why do you think that it's been so negative?
I think that they just don't understand the power business. You use coal because it's the cheapest fuel there is on a BTU basis. Apparently the railroads haven't figured that out yet. Because if they had figured it out, they would go back and look at the records from the Norfolk and Western. And the Norfolk and Western compared the BTU use in a reciprocating steam locomotive against the BTU usage in a diesel electric locomotive. That's why they justified the use of the steam locomotives they had for longer than anybody else in the country. The only reason they changed was because they got a new president who wanted to be a modern, up-to-date railroad. And he couldn't do it with steam power. They designed and built the John Henry, which was 4,500 horsepower, on 12 axles, And because it was only 4,500 horsepower versus more horsepower for the steam locomotives and the diesels, it didn't travel as fast, but they got 20% fuel savings on that locomotive based on their steam locomotives, which were side by side on an equal basis with diesel power at the time. The other reason is that the railroads would like to haul coal for the customer and not for themselves, okay? If they could convince the power industry to spend the money for the catenary to put over the railroad and get the government participate in that, they would do it in a minute. Because what they really like to do is run electric trains. Okay, they're Lionel boys at heart, okay, and the American Flyer boys at heart, because when they grew up, their noses were against the glass of the Walgreens drugstore, and they watched these trains going on in circles. No servicing required, no fueling required. What they don't realize is that if a power plant runs out of fuel, there's a brownout.
Yeah.
If it gets blown up, the whole railroad stops. That's okay, as long as you don't have to pay the bill.
Right. Well, you know, R.L. Banks recently in an article before he passed away talked about the re-electrification of America's railroads. So
Yeah.
there's lots of alternatives out there. Thank you. That's all my questions, Doug.
Thank you, sir. That concludes our hearing. Thank you very much.